Okay, let's talk about that voice inside your head. You know the one, that little narrator you live with 24/7? In this explainer, we're going to dive into 4 new pieces of research that, well, they might just change how you think about that voice and about yourself. And we're going to connect all these dots using one simple framework to show how our very idea of the self is changing, especially now in the age of AI. All right, let's jump in.
So, let's just sit with this for a second. This is the central question for our entire investigation. What if that you, that consistent chattering voice, isn't some permanent, unchangeable thing? What if it's more like a habit the brain has picked up? A habit that it can actually change, or even reorganize. This single idea, it's the key to everything we're going to talk about today.
All right, so first up, our first piece of the puzzle takes us inward. We're looking at some really fascinating clues coming out of meditation and neuroscience. And what they're telling us is that the way we relate to our own thoughts, it's way more flexible than we've been led to believe.
So there was this really cool study that looked at what happens when people practice self-observation. You know, that practice of just watching your thoughts and feelings float by without getting sucked into the drama. And the big question the researchers had was this: is that just a nice temporary feeling of calm you get, or is something deeper, something more permanent, actually changing inside your brain?
And what they found was kind of a big deal. The part of the brain responsible for all that inner chatter, that voice that's always going, me, 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 it actually quieted down. And at the same time, the parts of the brain that help you focus got stronger. It's like turning down the static and turning up the signal. But here's the kicker. This wasn't just a temporary effect. The researchers are saying this points to a long-term physical reorganization of the brain. The brain is literally rewiring itself.
Okay, so to really get what this means and how it connects to everything else, we need a map, basically. We're going to use something called the 5-state framework. Don't worry, it's super straightforward, but it's a really powerful way to see what's going on with our sense of self.
We're just going to focus on 3 of the states for now. First, there's the foundation state. Think of this as our default setting. It's when you are your thoughts, you are your feelings. There's no separation. Then you have the witness state. This is a huge shift. It's when your awareness can kind of step back and just watch your thoughts and feelings from a distance. You're not swept away by them anymore. And finally, there's the source state. This one's a bit deeper. It's the idea that awareness can exist all by itself, even before the brain builds a self to experience things.
So bringing it all back together, that first study we looked at, it's a perfect picture of the brain shifting from that foundation state to the witness state. It's literally rewiring itself to go from being stuck inside the storm of thoughts and feelings to being able to stand on the hill and just watch the storm pass by.
But that leaves us with a pretty big question, right? If our brains can do this, if the shift is possible, why do so few of us even know about it? And that's where our next piece of the puzzle comes in, and things get even more interesting.
Okay, on to part 2. So we've seen that the self can be observed from a distance, but this next study asks something even wilder. Does awareness even need a self to exist?
So another major paper decided to tackle this question head-on. They looked at what scientists call self-related processing. Basically, it's that non-stop background hum in your brain that's constantly building and rebuilding your story of you. And they asked a simple but huge question. What if that process just turned off? Would awareness just blink out of existence?
And the research pointed to 2 frankly mind-bending possibilities. First, you've got revision. This is where the sense of self just gets a lot quieter. It's less bossy. Awareness can watch it. It's still around, but it's not running the show. But then there's removal. And this is the radical one. This is where that whole self-building factory in your brain just shuts down completely. And what's left behind is just pure awareness, operating all by itself.
And if we go back to our map, you can see exactly where these fit. Revision is basically our witness state, right? The self is still there. You're just observing it. But removal, that's pointing straight at the source state, the idea that awareness can exist without a self attached to it at all.
Which, of course, leaves us with an even deeper question. If awareness doesn't need a self, then what exactly has been knowing your entire life? And right as we're trying to wrap our heads around that, a whole new character enters the story. All right, part 3, and this is where we get the plot twist. Because right at the exact moment that science is showing us how flexible and changeable our inner sense of self is, this massive external force, AI, is coming along and trying to make it more rigid than ever.
I mean, think about it. For pretty much all of human history, figuring out who you are was an inside job. You had to look inward, you had to reflect, you had to sit with your thoughts and feelings.
But that
is changing, and it's changing fast. Now, AI is becoming this kind of external architect of our identity. It's building a version of you, but from the outside in.
And researchers actually have a name for this. They call it the algorithmic self. It's a sense of who you are that's not based on your own direct feelings, but on data from your sleep tracker, your mood app, your social feed, all these external tools. The AI chews on all that data and then spits back a portrait of you for you to look at.
So what does this do on our map? Well, it does the exact opposite of meditation. It actually pushes us deeper into that foundation state. It locks our identity even more tightly to our experiences, except now those experiences are being filtered and even created for us by an algorithm.
And this brings up a really urgent, almost scary question for our time. If this algorithmic version of you feels completely real, if it knows what you like, predicts what you'll do, how would you even know? How would you know that your sense of self isn't really yours anymore?
And that brings us to our final piece of the puzzle. Because this entire investigation into the self, what it is, how flexible it is, how AI is messing with it, it all leads to a truly shocking conclusion about how much we don't know about consciousness itself.
Okay, so a huge scientific review was just published that basically asked, where do we actually stand on understanding consciousness? They used a really powerful real-world test. They looked at patients who might be conscious but can't communicate, people in comas or vegetative states, and what they found was stunning. Basically, the entire field of consciousness science is at a total crossroads.
It turns out our two best scientific theories for detecting consciousness, well, they're failing. You've got one that measures how complex brain signals are. You've got another that looks at how those signals spread through the brain. And the review found that when you actually try to use these on real human patients, neither one is reliable. They just can't consistently tell you if someone is actually aware or not.
Just let that sink in for a second. The takeaway is just jaw-dropping. With everything we've accomplished, science cannot reliably tell if another human being sitting right there in front of us is conscious. That is a monumental gap in what we know, way bigger than I think most people assume.
And so this is where all our threads, the flexible self, the algorithmic self, our scientific blind spots, all come crashing together in one final massive question. If we can't reliably detect consciousness in a person right in front of us, what in the world are we even talking about when we argue over whether an AI is conscious or not? It is the question for our time, especially as that line between our minds and our machines gets blurrier every single day.